Or live.
The chair recording.
Good morning, members and officers and viewers. Welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting. It is being conducted as a hybrid meeting in accordance with the remote meeting protocol and the Council's standing orders to ensure that we continue to take democratic decisions in an open and transparent manner. For those attending remotely, I would remind you that this meeting is being streamed live to the public. So can I remind you to switch off your camera and microphone when not speaking to the meeting to help improve the quality of the recording. And I ask remote members to switch on their chat functions and use this when they wish to speak. Please do not speak until I've invited you, and remember to switch off your camera and mic when you're finished. As this is a relatively small meeting, online voting may be required together with the votes of members present in the chamber. So before I declare a vote, I will ensure that all members' votes are collated. As well as being broadcast live, a recording of this meeting will be uploaded to the Council website for public viewing and training within the Council. Welsh translation of the meeting can be provided on request. Item 1, apologies.
One apology, Chair, from Councillor Baker Westhead.
Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest. Members? No? Thank you. None at this point. Minutes of the previous meeting, pages 3 to 10. For accuracy, page 3.
Yeah, well, it's actually page 1 of mine, but yeah, the first page. We mentioned that a committee member asked their status be marked as in attendance at the previous meeting. Well, it doesn't make any sense unless you say who the committee member was. So this has to be amended to say
Okay, it's Councillor Davis and we will amend it. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. If there is no objections, can somebody move them to record? Thank you, Matthew. And someone will second it, please. Councillor Bright, thank you. And item 4, Strategic Equalities Plan Annual Report. Council, call for Ms. Denton.
Thank you, Chair.
Present.
So before I die, everyone, good morning. So as an introduction, I'm Janice Dent. I'm the Policy and Partnership Manager at Newport City Council, and Equalities, Diversity and Inclusion. It comes under my umbrella, and Donald Natali is with me as well, who is just been recruited as the Senior Equalities Officer moving forward, just to be able to kind of support the work that we do in this area. Also on the call, I can see Councillor Batruni, who's the Cabinet Member with responsibilities for equalities, diversity and transformation as well. So please, nice to see you all. So as you know, thank you for taking your time to listen to us today. I'm sure you're all aware, equality or equity, diversity and inclusion are core values within Newport City Council, and they underpin everything that we do. So everything that we do, we could never contain within one report, but hopefully the report gives members enough of an opportunity to be able to see the work that's happened, and also help to identify those areas for improvement moving forward as well. So what we are looking to do today is just go through the highlights of the report. I'm sure everybody's had the papers beforehand, so we'll just go through the highlights of the report and then open it for questions, comments and recommendations, with the ultimate aim of hopefully moving it forward to Cabinet and then Council in line with the Equality Act for publication on the website. So hope that's okay, Chair.
It's fine, thank you very much.
Thank you. So as you know, this report details the progress made between the year 2021 to 22. So it's a historic look back at the activities during that year and the progress that we've made against the strategic equality objectives contained within the strategic equality plan for 2020 to 2021, to 2024. As we said, under the Equality Act, there's a responsibility to produce and publish this annual report by the end of the following year. And you will see quite a bit of data in relation to staff equalities within the report. And that, again, is one of the requirements under the Equality Act. So this report in particular is the second year of delivery of the plan. And we're really keen for members to have that oversight, strategic oversight of the work that's been undertaken so far, and to support the performance management of the objectives and the progress linked against each. So the quality objectives and the activities within the plan and the report were developed in partnership with key internal and external stakeholders and informed by community engagement and feedback. And this ensures that the plan enables us to deliver both a strategic vision for equalities, diversity and inclusion within the council, but also tangible outcomes for our communities and our residents. So, as with, I'm sure all committee knows, the pandemic was quite rife during the period, but I think you can see from the report that there was significant progress made despite those challenges. We also had the end of free movement from the EU during the period with the National Borders Act, and so that has meant that our focus has always maintained in relation to supporting Newport staff and residents to protect their rights and their entitlements. I just wanted, if it's okay with members and the chair, just to go through a few of the highlights. So there's lots in the report and there's lots in the overview paper, but I don't want to kind of go through them all. But I think just the couple that I wanted to pick out before we open up. So I think as a demonstration of the commitment at all levels of the council to equality, diversity and inclusion, we're really proud to say that the leader of the council was appointed as the Welsh Local Government Association lead for equalities, migration and anti-poverty. So I think it's really clear that everything that we do comes all the way down through the work, both of members, both of officers, and the work that we do in communities as well. We know that we need to improve in lots of places. So one thing that happened during the period was lots of training, including inclusive leadership training, and nearly 300 of our senior leaders and managers went through the training during the period. And this year we're looking at evaluating the impact that's had, particularly in relation to unconscious bias and the recruitment process. So we're working with colleagues in HR to be able to understand the actual impact of that training. The Equality, Hate Crime and EU statements awareness sessions have been delivered to all of our senior customer service staff. There's particularly lots of training for our track and trace kind of members, because there was lots of phone calls, as you can imagine, for different people, different residents. So making sure that anybody that phones the council or contacts us in whatever way has that kind of inclusion element to the conversation. We're not going to talk in great deal about our participatory budgeting process for the year. Was continued to focus on challenging inequality during the pandemic, and we know that lots of communities were particularly affected by the pandemic, both from an ethnic minority point of view, but also children and young people. So the year saw £415,000 worth of funding distributed to 79 community projects. And the work of that was supported by the Newport Fairness Commission to make sure that we were fair, equitable and inclusive. Our staff networks, I think, are one of our main celebrations for the year. So they were set up just at the end or just at the beginning of this year, of the period. And they've been really instrumental in influencing our policies and the workplace, our service delivery, and also our strategic decision making. And members of the staff networks have been involved in the recruitment process for our senior leaders as well, to make sure that we are embedding it right from the day go, really. School-wise, lots of work in relation to supporting students and again children and people from different communities across Newport. So particular rollout of emotionally based school avoidance support, and it is particularly to support children and people to continue to attend school in a way that works for them and for their parents. And our floating support schemes in particular, so over 2,665 people were supported to access and maintain their accommodation, which obviously is going to be another key responsibility for us this year, including adults with learning disabilities, refugees, people escaping domestic abuse, and unaccompanied asylum-seeking children as well. So those are the positives that I wanted to share, just a couple to pick out. Obviously, as you will see from the report, there's also some areas that we recognise we need to improve upon, and that's the kind of action plan moving forward. So in particular, the analysis of our workforce data, starting on page 42, highlights some particular areas, including the representation of minority ethnic staff. We've seen some increases, but we know there's still more to be done. So we've still, Donald is leading on a piece of work there with HR. And also we particular deep dive this year into understanding why our levels of leavers are higher and continue to rise for some of our particular staff groups. So that includes those from ethnic minority communities and also disabled adults as well. So I'm going to pause there and ask for any questions, but in general, we're just asking for the committee for any feedback, any comments, any recommendations, and then approval to take it forward to Cabinet and Council for full sign-off. Thank you.
Before I ask the committee to come in, on page 12, you've told us exactly what the strategic quality objectives are, but you haven't really addressed those in the report back to us as it's a journey, and you've told us a lot of statistics. You haven't told us where we are on these 6 very specific objectives.
So we've got the summary of achievement against each. See which is obviously the full agendas on different pages, isn't it? So the summary is on, starts on page 18. So that's against each of the objectives and the summary against each. And then there's further detail. So under each objective then, so equality objective 6 as an example, there's some feedback from each of those throughout the report. But yeah, I do appreciate it wasn't in the overview report, it was contained within the full report. Thank you, Chair.
Going over to the committee then, please. Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Welcome to the report and summary. That's the brief. Thank you. Too long on it. And yeah, we could clearly come a long way. I tend to be provide 10 years ago. I doubt that would have taken place in Newport. One of the previous, it's a general scrutiny plan, is a previous recommendations. We don't know whether it'll be taken forward by Dan or not. One of the concerns, not just me and Dan, I'm sure, is about community cohesion, but also about integration into society. I gather there's a fortnightly meeting between police and representatives of the ethnic minority communities. The recommendation we made was to ensure that you also have live people on these boards, because you're not integrating if you're not bringing everybody around the table. So I don't know whether that still continues. Another point is about just who is actually a community representative. There's lots of people in the community who say, I am, and I guess it's questioning, just because somebody stands up loudest in the paper, whether they are the right person. But just going on to the community, the other one is about language barriers, because vast majority of people come over here are really good and they learn the language. But I'd like to think that we'd be spending more time ensuring that they do learn the language rather than providing the language in their own, because that doesn't encourage them to. I'm quite lazy. If I go abroad, everything's in English, then I'm not going to want to communicate. So I think there are some areas there which actually need to assist. Like so, welcome vast majority report. I do think that perhaps we need to ensure that we've got proper integration, and that will also mean trying to ensure that members of whatever we like to call people in this country are also involved in that rather than separating them, because I think that would actually help community relations.
Great comments, and we'll take that into consideration for the next annual.
I think as well, within the report that goes to Cabinet now, there's a comment section for comments from Scrutiny that goes to Cabinet, so maybe there's something about that feedback back.
Well, we made the comments last year, actually, and this is, obviously not, we made the comments. So presumably the police still meet on a fortnightly basis. Do they with?
Yes, so the police still meet on a fortnightly basis to conduct community tension monitoring. But with the change in environment, the focus has moved towards tension monitoring for the situation in Ukraine. So that has changed, but we can provide that feedback to the community tension monitoring group.
So have there been, as a result of our previous recommendations, has there been invitations sent to members of the white community to attend these meetings?
I cannot confirm that at this moment, but I can consult with the group and find out if the recommendations have been taken.
So just our recommendation to Cabinet, and then Cabinet make their own decision.
No,
I
we'll
appreciate
get back to you as soon as possible as to whether that's happened or not.
Our committee clerk is looking for the actual minutes from last year. She'll send you the actual points we want to address and a written.
Brilliant, thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Can I ask a couple of questions first, please? The Strategic Equality Group. I had a stint in it as a member a couple of years ago.
Right.
And I found it a very good forum for, exploring issues of equalities. I came out of it because I felt, I'm glad to see the reference that the membership is reviewed to fit a pattern, and I think that is the right way to do things, At the time, I could not understand why I was on it, which is why I said I'm taking a place of someone who should be on it, and that's the reason I left it. But it was a very good forum. Can I ask, when was the last time it met? And has it met since the elections?
Yes, it was. Is it last time?
Last month, yes. So the Strategic Equality Group meets every quarter, and our next meeting is actually on the 13th of October.
So when was the last time it met?
It was in August.
In August.
Yeah, we haven't got the exact dates, but yeah, it was in
It is
August.
quarterly, is it?
Yes, it meets quarterly.
Well, I think the report probably doesn't seem to give it justice in the sense that might have been useful to outline, what happened in the last year, what sort of topics it explored, and so on. I'm raising it also because back in February, I was approached by someone from the Muslim Engagement and Development, MEND, and Ms. Izeki, and she was very much interested in the topic of Islamophobia. I noticed here that they've got the Islamophobia Awareness Month. And actually, she's been sort of kind of chasing me because I met with her all. Thereafter, really, the council's adopting the APPG definition of Islamophobia, quite a short statement, which I think, I couldn't say anything controversial about it. And I think, it would be very good because Islamophobia is an issue. And, Newport has significant Muslim sort of population. So I've actually thought, I've referred her to the Strategic Equality Group.
Yeah.
I've been a very good sort of time, for her to come and address the group, and then maybe take things forward from that. It's a good education to members, and it's a good way of, interacting with the council group, really. And she said she could not make contact at all. So anyway, I've contacted the cabinet member now,
Right.
because he's the chair of that. So
Yeah.
I'm going to let him have time to deal with that now. So that's something I would ask him. But I think it is a topic that the group would find very important to address, and maybe that is what next to forward.
Brilliant.
But in the meantime, I think the group sort of activities would be useful addition in the report. If I may also bring another issue, which is to do, I noticed another reference on the leadership issue, that the council leader is being appointed, is it the WLGA?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Matthew actually mentioned that just before the meeting started. I know from previous sort of monitoring of things is that he apparently meet with a group from ethnic minority communities. The meeting, I think, are informal, because we did ask for them to be more formal, minuted, because there's been sort of calls from some of the other people saying, well, why not us? I also felt that, if we're looking at community cohesion, is that it would be particularly useful for that to have also representative from the white community, from the majority community, as it were, majority ethnic community. Yeah. We don't know what happened to that, but I know from sort of experience, and when you sort of say, a group, ethnic minorities, people then tend to marginalize that. It tends to be, but there is that when they deal with it. Over 30 years in the council, I've seen that, and then it becomes just, a compartment, and I think we should be all embracing myself. So, I'm not sure what happened since those meetings were being held, or those recommendations were made.
I just raised that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. So, perhaps a reference to those would be useful.
Definitely, thank you. I will take it back. Unfortunately, there's no excuse, but obviously the last one was before our time, but we can definitely kind of look into what happened with that and get back to you as soon as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Horton.
Sorry. There you go. You have to excuse any background noise. I'm afraid I'm in work. My question is about page 38 on the report.
Let me just
So
find it. Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so under the sexual orientation piece, sorry, my MacBook's trying to do an update. It says that we've had so it appears that we've had a decrease in gay and lesbian applications, but an increase in leavers. So why do you think that is happening? Does this lead, or is this one of the reasons why there was so much training undertaken, because there was some inherent prejudice?
I'm not sure that that's actually come to the fore. It hasn't come through in any of the exit interviews that we've seen to date. But that's one of the things that I mentioned in the overview of the work that we're undertaking this year, is that deep dive into why is there a particular pattern in relation to leavers. So I think that's something that we really
I know
need to look into.
you mentioned about some of the ethnic minorities, but I don't believe you mentioned about any of the sexual orientation.
No, there's a couple of things. So there's the ethnic minority disabled adults, and also, I didn't mention it, but there's a few of the protected characteristics groups that we need to understand. Okay. That and kind of more importantly understand why, and then what are we going to do about it is the important next step.
Do we have is there a timeline around that?
We're working with HR, so it should be by the end of this so it's this financial year that we're hoping to get a real kind of action plan to move forward on it.
Okay. So that's an action plan. So once the action plan's in place, going by previous experiences, how long, sorry, how long do you envisage that to take? Because obviously it's something which is quite important. If we're losing staff because we are, I'll use the word failing. There might be a bit of a strong word, but I'll use the word failing. Then that obviously that needs to be put to bed and resolved quite quickly, because if it's happening in one area, then the odds are that it's happening in many areas. So
Definitely.
and I know from previous meetings we've had where we've spoken that retention is quite a difficult thing anyway. So if we can do something which sort of minimises any activities which seem to be a little bit old school, shall we say, then I think that needs to be expedited.
Yeah, and we're also working closely with HR on the new workforce people strategy, people and culture strategy, and that is contained within that as well. So that's working alongside. So we're not waiting to do the deep dive before we look at the culture strategy. That's the people strategy. It'll all happen, you know,
So
in tandem.
they dovetail together then.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So the exit strategy or the exit survey is specific about these areas. Do they need more application?
I think that's why we need to have that kind of deep dive and understand it a bit more to be able to kind of look at those, and if there are any themes coming forwards. And
Sorry,
indeed, you know,
No, sorry. I'll let you finish. Then I'll just jump in my question. Sorry.
yeah, I think because this report, even though it's still last year, it's only just been compiled, if you like. So it was only when we looked at the data that we saw that this issue was happening. And we haven't taken, and we say members have seen it, the student quality script, but we haven't actually taken it anywhere formally as yet. But that's the kind of next stage is to look into why, if there are any patterns, and if there's something that we need to, not if, there will be something that we need to learn from that. And like you said, Councillor, to put it into place ASAP really, to be able to support that area of work.
I wasn't so much querying how the data is analysed. I was looking at the source data and how it's achieved. So, in other words, do we need to ask different questions of the levers? Obviously, the actual questions that you ask will be helpful.
Okay, yeah, we can send a copy over of the questions that are asked. And then, yeah, any recommendations on how that can be improved, I'm sure we can fit in with the workforce strategy.
I'm a big believer in stealing with pride. So is there anybody or any other councils? I would imagine the demographic would be reasonably similar. I know we have quite a big demographic ourselves within the city. However, looking at the employment of the council workers, I would say that seems reasonably normalised. So has this piece of work been done elsewhere? And if so, can we go and look at what their outcomes are, and if we can, like as I say, steal with pride, so we can get sort of behind the 8 ball?
Newport City Council is part of a network of other councils known as Proud Councils. So far we have 10 councils within the South Wales area who regularly meet to promote LGBT+ rights. So as a next step, we can consult other members of Proud Councils. And in addition to the point in terms of our representation, workforce representation and levers, I'd also like to add that our staff networks are playing an important role in how we promote equality, diversity and inclusion within the workplace. So taking the information in the report into consideration, we have been working with our staff networks to see how we can create a more inclusive environment within the workplace, and also identify how we can address some of the challenges that people from underrepresented groups may face. So our staff networks are also leading that work that we're partnering with HR.
That's great. That's great. Is there any way we could cast that net a little bit wider than the people we're already dealing with? As in, is there any other councils that we could look at? As I say, if this piece of work has already been done, which I would imagine it has been, because we're not reinventing. We don't really want to reinvent the wheel. It's just the question is, okay, we are talking with, as you say, another 9-10 other councils. However, has this already been done elsewhere? That's my question. And what statistically does that look like, and how were these issues overcome elsewhere? even if we shave a couple of months off the project, there's potential for improvement. Thank you.
And as always, if you haven't got the specific answer, come back to us with
Yes.
a written answer, please.
Yeah.
Rather than tell us something that might be slightly inaccurate.
Yeah, no.
Councillor Bartolotti.
Thanks, Councillor Horain. I just want to say, as cabinet
So
member,
the Green Party leader in Newport.
oh God, no. I just want to say thanks for all the challenges. I've heard all the points being made by the relevant members, Councillor Evans, Al Nuami and Horton, and taking it on board. We'll definitely consider all the comments, and take Councillor Horton's point about benchmarking beyond our family. I think that makes sense, and we maybe should consider that. But I would say is, in terms of retention, every institution in the country is struggling. You listen to any institution, public or private, and retention of staff and recruiting staff to key positions, regardless of the protected characteristic, is really, really difficult at this moment. So it's important, as the officer said, about having a deep dive and properly understanding the trend and the pattern and what is the driver, because there might not be a driver, just being in fit with a pattern of people moving to different jobs for whatever reason, increased pay usually. So it's about understanding before making knee-jerk reactions. But be rest assured, if we found a pattern that is particular to Newport, that we're not doing something, there's something not in place, we will rectify it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bartolotti. Okay. Has anybody else got any other questions? Councillor Brown?
Yeah, thank you. Just maybe just when reading the report, just about the data, referring to how many employees the council has, and you do have a disclaimer saying data's captured at different points.
Yeah.
But on page 40, it said data's captured on the 31st of March 2022, and you get a breakdown by plane scale. And the bottom, you can sum up the total female and total male employees we have, comes to 6,657. Then on page 42 also says data capture the same date, but there's fewer employers. Just one house. We got 5,982, but when you sum up the totals, it actually comes to 6,657, and then but it's referenced to the same date. I just wondered how that discrepancy, or maybe I'm just completely wrong.
I will check that and just make sure there's been no typo or anything, and then get back to you, rectify it. That's rather than kind of trying to get this right, that's happened. So yeah, we'll look into that today and get back to you.
Is everyone content?
Yeah. Sorry.
So, please.
Yeah, I just sort of noticed page 40, the table. Now, the reason I noticed that is because there's a sudden jump, isn't it, in the number of sort of female employees on 70,000 plus, from 33 to 52. But the male one is staying the same. Now, is that the result then of some pay policy to sort of bring people to level? Why is that sudden jump with the female sort of employees and the male one?
I'll need to look into it, but bearing in mind doing that, there's the restructure and the senior leadership of the council now has a higher percentage of female to male. So I think that's probably the that is, but I will look into it just to make sure.
Yeah, so is that what we're referring to? Is it a progressive thing, isn't it, in terms of, and are those sort of employees, just as a matter, they include sort of the schooling?
Some of the these do include school people, but I think one of the things that will have pushed it up as well is the directors, the student directors.
Identifying those as sort of head teachers.
Yeah. Is that senior?
Otherwise, I think we're doing very well.
Yeah. I think we've done some really good progress in relation to gender, the gender gap. I think there's still more work to be done, right? And, we don't want to lose the progress that we've made as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your attendance this morning, Mr. Matau. Did I get that one right?
Yes.
Not something right. Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor, for your attendance.
Thank you. Thanks all.
We're moving on to item number 5. It's the climate change plan, the annual reports.
Yeah. No. It's a great names up here.
Okay.
Mention a bit like actually.
Yes.
It's a digital services manager.
I think not the information manager to get that good in the list.
Can you introduce yourselves?
It's so I'm Paul Jones, I'm Strategic Director for Environment and Sustainability.
I'm Sylvia Sanso as the Head of Environment and Climate Protection.
Ross Bella, the climate change service manager.
Ross is the one who's done all the work on it.
Right. My understanding of this report is that it's already been to cabinet. It's coming back.
No, it's going to cabinet on the 12th. So this is for committee to give its observations, and it's the first. In fact, it's a pre-first. It's an introductory. It's an introductory annual report. We only just adopted our climate change strategy. There's a lot of work that's been going on, so we want to try and capture this so we can get into this annual cycle early rather than wait a whole another year before we start going in and we take on board comments, given that it's a pressing issue.
That's the only question I've got. Is annual reports going to be sufficient? It might be that it's required by legislation, but it's such a fast moving target. But we need to have more regular updates on progress.
And that's one of the things for the committee to advise on as part of this, and whether changes to the governance structure that we've set up, we've got internal governance structure within officers, how we work on this, whether scrutiny or cabinet wants more regular updates. This is the proposal of the plan, but that's one of the things that we've asked for, whether detail is there and whether there's more information. So it's sort of draft for scrutiny.
Thank you.
I'll make very little introduction. I'll try and keep the talking to the minimum. So if you want to just do an overview.
Yes. So, well, as Paul said, as you all know, climate emergency was declared that last year. One of the commitments was to, develop and approve a climate change plan with, defined actions as to how we could improve. The plan was approved March last year, and there's you had the chance to read the report. There's a quite long list of specific actions and objectives, that map our road to becoming zero carbon by 2030 as a council. And there is a whole governance structure behind it once the plan was approved. There's a climate change board. There's one super bridge of the things in the under the plan, and the groups are working on delivery of those actions. So, the expectation is that we will be reporting on those specific actions. It's quite detailed. We're proposing an annual report because normally when you do reports on a number of topics, you normally do an annual summary report, but there will be updates being provided through the MLF system on the progress against the actions on a different, more frequent basis. And also some of them more relevant actions will be incorporated as part of the service plan as well. So there will be reporting and scrutiny on a quarterly basis as part of the service plan progress anyway. So, there's a number of ways where information will be coming through members, and obviously updates will come in member and cabinet anyway. But one of the ways where we can not only inform you, but also inform residents about progress is this annual report. And we thought one would be prepared as an introductory report now. So obviously, because it covers the period before the plan was approved, it doesn't have the same structure in terms of what are the agreed actions and how we are performing against them. But we thought we could kind of set the scene, if you want, in a sense, by introducing the plan, the key delivery themes, what are, you know, the vision and the main priorities for each area, and then providing examples of all the work that we've been doing behind the scenes to be in a good position to deliver onto the, you know, objectives of the plan. So that's what we have prepared and brought to your attention today. As Paul said, there were a number of questions asked from you today in terms of, you think this is adequate, you would like to see more detail, less detail, different structure, you think these reporting cycle would be enough. So I'm not going to go into the detail of the plan because, you know, I guess you've read it, but any questions you have on anything? So.
That completes your introduction of the plan.
Also, sorry, I forgot. Just wanted to mention that the cabinet member, you know, really wanted to be here to present the plan to you as well. But unfortunately, she's on leave at the moment, away, and her internet connection was so bad that she was unable to make it. So apologies.
Nothing.
Yeah, I'm just happy to make some comments if I can on the general report with a few questions at the end. I like the format with the 6 key objectives. I welcome some of the actions already taken. Good to see the Coed Melon Park as an example of how well used it is and how it's improved the footpath and the low level lighting and everything has been a very welcome addition. Looking forward to the Devon Place footbridge being open finally. Again, should give more people opportunity to walk into the centre from this time. Although, if you've seen the cycle lanes, to me that's a complete waste of money because you've just got a small little section, when you're going on the road and you see a small section and it disappears. I really don't understand why we are wasting money on what I'd call this personal view of some gimmicks, because if you have a cycle lane, you have a cycle lane which goes from there to there. You don't have all this suddenly disappears there, and you pick it up. So, but that's I'm sure you've mentioned that. As far as the case studies, they are useful, as was the report. The timescales, we update lacks any depth or detail. So it's basically about when the plans are coming forward. You haven't got any perhaps understanding at this stage of the timescales of what action is going to be taken when. And for instance, we talk about financial commitments, but there's no indication of how much, when, and what is to be prioritised. So I think over time we need to ensure that it's great having a wish list, but if you only do 2 things on the wish list, you haven't got the financial support. Then it's great to see new buildings will be net carbon zero. Given the fact that this building is probably the most inefficient of all our property portfolios, when can we expect to see some action in making this more sustainable? After all, it is energy efficient. After all, this is our flagship building. So that's one question. And the other is about active travel. We're talking about reducing carbon emissions for our home school transport. And I'd like to know how we're going to do that, and whether we're going to reduce the eligibility criteria from 3 miles to 2, which will encourage more people to actually use the bus service. So that's just a general comment and a few questions.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. That's quite a list.
Did you get any more? I think I've got maybe 80% of them. So
That's fine.
yeah, but
I can pick up everything.
I'll kick up on a few and then I'll ask people to really understand this comment. So just going back on homeschool transport, in terms of reducing emissions, one of the big things from investment in electric fleet for the buses. And so we've been really successful over the last 3 years of attracting funding into the buses. And you'll see, I think we've got about 20 now. We can transport the buses that have electric vehicles. We've got big plans to expand in that. We've been working with for the capacity of that, so that's important. But then sort of linking on with cycling, yes, there's a lot more work to make cycling feel safe to use rather than just small gaps. We know we've got work to do on that. We've been really successful in attracting active travel funding, but a lot of it's been used for enhancing what I call off-road. Gwener's a great example. The reporting locks stuff that we've done in around the canal, Devon Facebook operational on that connectivity. We know we need to do more, and there's been a change in transport policy nationally and the Welsh Government in terms of pedestrian and cycling first. The cycle around Facebook will be modified after the bridge has gone in. We've been constantly trying to get the bridge because that's a huge challenge in itself. But there's certainly a lot more work to do on that, and that'll come through in our active travel plans over the future. In terms of depth of detail, yeah, agree. But we really wanted to come to you now, whilst we've only just adopted it. But I got feel was, the way the government structure works, you wait another cycle, but finally you're halfway through the council term and you've not really had a chance to feedback and give you commenting. So it's an iterative thing and we're making progress. But I think it's important to note that, even over the last 2 or 3 years, whilst it's been less formed in terms of a strategy, we have made some good progress. And so that's how we build on that. But in financial, yeah, I mean, it's a really good point in terms of finance. What we are trying to do is, it's a movable feast for one. So certainly the grant structure from Welsh Government and UK Government is not fully formed, it's evolving all the time. Good example of that, when we build new buildings, construction projects tend to take a long time already, but the construction projects we've been in for the last 2 years, they've almost changed their scope throughout it to adapt to the changing funding arrangements and just the realisation of energy use. So we've had to do that and address that, and it's still not fully clear, but it will become clear. But also what we're doing is we're incorporating that into our decision making for the NTFP and for the council's budget, and it's for you to come back to us and say, this needs to be prioritised over that. Because we do understand, in essence, there's all these things we have to do. So regardless of whether we want to spend the money on making our fleets electric only by 2030, we won't be able to buy diesel vehicle. That doesn't matter. So that's kind of built in. But there's other stuff we want to do to accelerate the pace. In terms of this building, you're right, but we've got a lot. It's the same in schools. We've got a lot of old building stock that is very difficult and challenging to make more energy efficient. So what I feel that we progressed in the last 18 months probably is at least we're now stopping adding to that. So our new builds, we've got an understanding in school and the new projects we're building is that we make them net carbon zero, we bring that, and then we start dealing with some of the more difficult stuff. So not that we haven't done any progress, we've retrofitted a lot of energy efficiency things like LEDs and mains and fadings, but those are going to be the really challenging areas. See if there's anything else that was missed.
100%.
I don't know whether.
Yes.
There's lots of
Things to add to that. In terms of timescales, yes, noted, and I know this report may seem a bit light in terms of detail, but as I explained earlier, it's like a pre-report on the run-up to the plan. It will be much more precise because, there's detailed objectives and actions in the climate change plan, and there's an indicative timescale on when we plan to achieve, and then through the regular reporting, we will be providing an update on how we're doing. So, I expect that will be properly addressed when we start reporting against the actual plan, which, this report doesn't cover. Same for the financial commitments, and actually, you may be pleased to hear that our head of finance is very keen on, hearing about figures from us as part of, the work being developed by the different subgroups as we delve a bit deeper into the actions and we consider how we're going to deliver. We're trying to identify, okay, what's the financial requirement here? How much money are we talking about to deliver this? And how can we fund it? Is there external funding available? Are we talking about the council maybe looking to ways of funding this if it's going to go ahead? So that will become much more clearer as we progress and have more time to walk into those actions. And I suspect you can add some detail around buildings.
Yeah, so just with regards to
building retrofit program really. We are going through a process with refit, which is a framework where we've been looking to identify and deliver whole phases of works. We're developing our first £2 million phase of works at the moment, which will cover sort of 10 to 15 buildings. And we'll deliver that and move on to the next one, and the next one, work our way through the estate. And the benefit of taking that approach, where you put together a range of measures rather than just taking the low-hanging fruit, is that we are hoping to try and tackle some of the more difficult buildings, where we need to take action around insulation, external insulation, roof insulation, etc. So we've got some, very sort of historic buildings in our estates that we need to bring up to date to be energy efficient in support of our 2030 goals.
And just one other thing, just about buses and electric cars. Are they run on these lithium batteries?
Yes, so all of the electric vehicles in our fleet and Newport bus fleets are all variant of lithium.
Because I saw that horrendous fire on the bus, and the bus literally went up with seconds in Berlin or somewhere, and they've stopped. I don't know. Probably not their expertise, but if you look online, it's everything. Apparently, it just goes up, and like the other speeds as well. I think there's some horrendous pictures.
I've seen that before specifically, but I think because electric technology is newer and less common than fossil fuel technology, very small number of instances of issues like that are reported, because fires for fossil fuel vehicles are every day, they don't get the same attention. So I think there is an increased risk from electric vehicles.
And replacement battery costs for electric cars?
It's not, it's not foreseen that you will be replacing battery within the life of vehicles. So vehicles that are coming to our fleet at the moment, most of them have 8-year warranties on batteries and drivetrain, which is beyond the period of which the council would normally retain the vehicle. So I don't think that's being an issue.
So you looked at our vehicles and the vehicle, so the actual skeleton of the vehicle gets much more of a hammering. That's just so if it lasts 8 years, that'd be quite nice to have. But it is emerging technology, isn't it? So we're all getting used to it. Where we've changed the refuge fleets and even for refuge drivers, so we're finding little issues and things, but with technology, and as we get used to it,
you started off having hydrogen vehicles. Well, do you remember those hydrogen vehicles we had down here? We did.
There are some hydrogen solutions, but we think it's less likely to become mainstream. Obviously, electric vehicles have really taken off in the last couple of years, and it's our sort of easiest. And in terms of the sort of vehicles that the council buys, obviously there's a number of small vans. I think most of it is quite specialised vehicles, refuge, using. So probably conventional or new conventional is where most of us will go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Horton.
Hi, sorry, I'm just going to change screens. My question is twofold, really. The first part is carrying on from what Matthew said about the cycling. There doesn't seem to be any cycle paths which have been marked out around any of the riversides or any of the which are designated footpaths. Is that going to be something that's going to be resolved in the coming weeks, months, years? That's my first question. So if you would like to answer that one first, please.
Yes. Do you want me to go first, or do you want to do all your questions?
No. If you just, it's only this very different questions. So if you
okay. First, so in terms of cycle paths, that comes under our active travel plan. There's definitely, we accept there's a need for expanding that, and there is ongoing works on that. However, a lot of the sort of cycle network is being reviewed as part of the Burns work. So this is the Burns Commission stuff that was funded to help support Newport when the M4 was and what we thought it didn't go ahead. And so we're hopeful to bring some quite enhanced dedicated bike lane infrastructure to Newport. I don't know if you've seen, so one of the first projects we've gone ahead, not choosing in your ward, but the sort of interconnection between Cardiff and Newport through Marshfield, NCN 88, which is going to have a significant upgrade. That's the sort of standard we'd like to bring to cycle network across the city. It's just a bit of development work that needs to be done.
I've seen that one they're talking about.
But so just to be sure that there's ongoing work across the city in terms of how we can enhance that, and we recognise that we need to do a lot more.
There's some places which can have quite quick fixes to try and generate some segregation, because at the moment there's quite a number of footpaths, high volume footpaths which are being used, and there's zero segregation. There's constant accidents happening. There's obviously we won't talk about the electrical bike issues which we have at the moment. Just sticking pure proper cyclists. It's essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, I could be wrong, it has been known to happen according to my wife, that it's just in many cases it's a simple case of just putting some lines on the footpaths, just so that there's, I'm sure it's far more than that. However, that's the public perception, is all this needs to generate some form of segregation is somebody coming along with the cart and the yellow paint and sticking it on the ground. Is it not as simple as that?
It is a little bit more complex because it requires traffic orders and consultation on changes in traffic orders, and then also requires sort of road safety audits as well that need to be built up. So there's quite a lot of boring work that goes on before it, but in essence there are some quick wins, as you say, and so those are being worked on. Those are recognised. We need to do more on that.
I broke up a little bit there, but I got the gist of what you were saying. And my second question is around the charging of electric vehicles. Do we have, or is there a joined up approach to what the businesses are doing with their facilities? So the likes of Costa's, Tesco's, any of the other big businesses which are putting in charging stations. Do we have a joined up approach so that we're not, so the council isn't installing excess capacity in the areas where the businesses are actually doing it themselves as well, so that we can try and maximise our potential catch of utilisation?
Yeah, the answer is yes. So all publicly accessible charges are mapped already. So we use that mapping to kind of identify where the gaps are in the city, and we can look at where their gaps are for different types of charges, whether they're slow, fast, or rapid. And we also have data on where people do not have their own private off-street parking. So we can see areas where it would be of benefit to install chargers either in our car parks or on the highway. So those residents aren't excluded from the opportunity of taking up electric vehicle chargers. So we do have that mapping, and we do look at things like the number of minutes walk that any resident is away from a charger, and use that to look for opportunities in between. And obviously the density of those chargers will increase over time, and demand will increase. So that's a sort of moving picture in terms of how we approach that.
Okay.
Probably just to add is that sort of our investments in the electric charging infrastructures. It's a range of different ones. So it goes from the sort of triple type chargers that we've got some of our car parks, people can top up, to the rapid charger stopping, which is a lot of the businesses invested in. Shell, the BP, they're putting the rapid chargers in, and then also to the stuff that we're trying to do now in residential streets where people don't have off-street parking. So it is a whole blend, and the market will pick up some of it, but may not be interested in other bits. So it's an evolving situation. But the ability to charge a car electrically in Newport over the last 3 years has increased dramatically, both in terms of council offer and in terms of the private sector.
So you say dramatically, but that's a word. What would be that as a number, please?
Give you the numbers? Yeah. Probably not off the top of my head, but we can certainly give you the numbers, put them in the report.
As a rough value, by the end of this financial year, the council is engaged in totally about 100 publicly accessible charges, which is by far the majority of charges as a proportion in the city. I can't give the total values, but could get up.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bright.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, yeah, it's a great report, and I particularly like the case study, no MoMA, and actually it was signposted, physically signposted in the streets, so we won't get constituents really saying council hasn't cut grass. I think that's really good result there. And just flicking through it, talking about the carbon literacy, and just mentioned because you've got it in the report, you said in 26 managers started attending carbon literacy training. So, but I mean, prior to this incoming in Wigton Upper report, they said that 300 leaders that attended inclusive leadership training in start. So, what this 26 number looks good, but are we aiming to get to that? Well, how and you've mentioned about cohorts, but is the ambition that everybody had this carbon literacy training? Because I think it's vitally important that knows how to reduce their carbon footprint.
It's definitely something we're looking to expand. We've got plans for that also for members. I would say probably in terms of our climate change strategy, we're a fair way behind the agenda, which has been for a while. So we've got some catch up to do, but maybe.
Yeah, so there are 3 additional training sessions which we've booked in already to the Newport Managers Network yesterday, and it's mandatory training for the managers within that network. So senior managers to attend that meeting coming months. And the ambition is, subject to funding, that training will then be rolled out or further across the organisation. It's really valuable training.
Yeah, just to add, obviously, there's been changes in the recent structure. So there's been a fair amount of people that maybe new to the organisation. It happens the same with elected members. There was a round of training done the previous year, and a number of people, and having a members that everybody completed the training. And now we have to, in a sense, start again. And this has been pushed recently. I've been copied to the emails, and I think all of you are invited. And I do encourage you, because we still have a lot of slots available for the October cohort of the training. There's always this has been pushed nationally as well, and what's going on, they're trying to engage and offer training. So there's training sessions available for WLGA and other organisations. So there's a wider push for people to be aware of what we're talking about and enhance their knowledge. So that's something quite high up in our agenda.
That's great, thank you.
Chair, I'm going to go a little bit back to fundamentals now. I'm trained as an engineer, so I like precision, but also, pragmatism as well. Now, I look at the vision, and the vision is excellent. We've got to have a vision, even if it might be a little bit too ambitious. I think we have to have it. The priorities, though, they all refer to the net zero carbon by 2030. Can someone please explain precisely what that means?
I'll say, previously the term used may have been carbon neutral. The term net zero carbon neutral indicate that you've got zero balance between the carbon emissions that you are creating and those that you are absorbing or offsetting.
Is it a trees to balance it?
Yes, so in terms of our own emissions currently, we are terminology is sequestering, so we are absorbing about 1% of our total emissions. So yeah, by planting trees, by managing land in a better way, there are opportunities to absorb carbon. Obviously the best thing to do is always to reduce your demand, to get that down to the absolute minimum. Hence why we try to build net zero carbon buildings, so we're not adding on to our sort of challenge. But anything that is left, will have to be sequestered and offset.
So can I ask, do you honestly believe this is achievable by 2030?
Yes, I do.
For the council?
Yes, I do.
We're going to still be using. Okay, so we're going to phase natural gas, which seems to be the culprit these days. No one wants to say, it's all to do with the Ukraine. But what about electricity? Because that is generated using gas.
In the UK at the moment, yes, quite a reasonable portion of it is, but that will change over time. And the forecasts for the carbon intensity of the UK grid, the government forecast by 2030, range from 0 to about what they are today. So if the UK as a whole continues to make quite a fast process on decarbonising, then the energy that we're bringing into our buildings will be.
Well, in that case, I would suggest, that the report again, I sort of thought about the Welsh language. I honestly believe that is a very tall order. Now, there is also 2050, so I don't know what that one is.
The 2050.
For 2030, I think, we've got what, 8 years?
2050.
I think that's a very tall order. So I'm going to ask you, our report should quantify the progress from year to year on how near we are to that. And what the trees or other balancing that we have done to actually offset the use, bearing in mind that we are still buying our electricity from companies that actually use power station powered by gas.
Our electricity that we procure is backed by certificates to say that it only comes from hydropower, wind and solar. So I understand that in reality the UK grid has a carbon intensity to it. We have certificates from the county perspective to say that we are purchasing from those generators.
So I was in another place when the question of the new legislature came. And the change in design to move from gas boilers to one driven by electricity is going to require the laying of an 11 kV cable to bring it to that site, with all the attendant costs and delays of that. Now, I sort of thought, let's think about it. Why not have or consider having then a wind turbine to generate the electricity for that? But we seem to have ruled that out, and yet that is the obvious way forward for reducing your carbon footprint, But we're still going to rely on an electricity supply, which, as I have said, it's not really carbon free, is it?
Obviously, in relation to that theme specifically, you see that urban environment isn't suitable for deemed suitable for something like a wind turbine and planning perspective. And what we are trying to do is install solar panels elsewhere on our land and on our estate to try and increase the proportion of renewable energy within Newport and on our buildings. But as I say, the electricity that we do buy is backed by zero carbon certificates.
Sorry, can I just chip in on that?
Yeah,
Why should we have a CHP on this leisure centre?
When we looked at the net zero carbon options, a CHP, given that it uses gas, would be making carbon emissions between now and the end of the CHP life. And the carbon emissions by 2030 from CHP are higher than other options.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I was going to say that the report, I know it's an introductory one. I cannot pass a judgment on how good this is. I suppose we're going to have a report, so it's useful, it's a useful statement. But I can remember filling a survey addressing these issues. Council surveys in the wake of the motion that we passed at council a few months ago. And I think that survey, was obviously a public survey. There's no mention of the results of that survey.
No, so the survey is.
Which address issues like land, building, ambition.
So I believe the survey that you're referring to was the survey that covered the ambitions for Newport as a whole. It's part of the data collection exercise to try and feed into a separate plan, which we'll work on with public sector partners in Newport to eventually come up with a plan for the whole city. So that's still open. You know, it's been to other forums. We're still collecting input from residents, businesses.
But that survey is finished, isn't it? Yeah.
But just to go back and explain the point, is that there's two different, we're talking here about our climate change strategies as an organisation, as a council, which includes our influence on other organisations. The 2050 targets, 2030 is for the public sector organisations themselves. 2050 is for the wider city, that includes obviously individuals there. So there's two targets in there. Effectively, the public sector running ahead to try and encourage and also develop infrastructure. You mentioned about the electricity infrastructure. That is one of the challenges we've got, not just with new buildings or with upgrading buildings, but also with electric vehicle charging. Some of the constraints on where we can put electric vehicle charges very much around grid capacity. So we do need to improve the grid capacity across the board, because there will be more demand for clean electricity.
And just to add that, that's linked to the local area energy plan, which again was approved this year in July. And that in that plan, even if there's like a council approved plan, we are just one of the key players, because you have to take into account residents, you have to take into account, you know, private business organisation, other stakeholders, because that's about emissions across Newport. So, you know, we can influence things and we can act on what depends on us, but it's a way wider, you know, approach to tackling emissions, and it has different objectives attached to it. So yeah, as Ross mentions, there's been a survey being circulated and people encouraged to participate on what needs to be taken into account as part of that wider approach. There will be information on progress against the local area energy plan coming to, you know, scrutiny committee as well, you know, because this is quite a, you know, wide world when you're talking about climate change. So I do apologise if it can be a bit confusing when you're talking about different elements.
One last question, which is really sort of specific on page 60, on priority 1. It says our elected members and workforce will be encouraged and supported to consider their individual contribution to becoming net zero carbon by 2030. And leaders will role model council's expectation. How are we going to put that into practice?
So that is going back to what we talked about in terms of the climate change training session that we've had. So some of the cabinet have already had that, and then it's offered to more members as well. So that forms part of it.
That training, yeah?
So you'll have training on how to understand carbon, but also how to improve yourself, because of us as civic leaders as well, running ahead, and things that we can do and adjust in our own lifestyle, not in terms of just scrutinising the council, also in terms of the other things that we have an impact on.
All I was frightened when I looked at my carbon footprint. You know, I looked at it and I can't see how if I continue with the same way.
You can have to change your ways, councillor.
You know, unless I completely get rid of my body. And with maybe a small wind turbine or solar panel or it's frightening individually how much carbon emission you know, and I've got a huge big tree in the garden, and I don't think it's doing much for that.
So, well, maybe you can be our case study before and after.
8 years' time, Councillor Martin, did you want to come back in?
Yes, please. I see on page 73 of the report, you have all the information about the annual carbon reporting and how it's being generated and where it's coming from. So it goes 1920, 2021, 20 to 21, and 21 to 22. Obviously, these periods were through the COVID period, where I would have thought we would have been there would have been a much lower utilization. How do you think this, or what do you think this picture is going to look like in the coming sort of 12 months, 24 months, 36 months? Is it going to be, are we going to see a step up in what this chart looks like, or is there going to be a downward trend?
I would say it depends on which element of the overall emissions we're looking at, but in general, the total trend will be downwards versus pre-COVID periods. Obviously, we did see the dip during COVID, but actually it was not as significant as people may think, because a lot of our buildings were still open in some respects, even if there was only 1 or 2 people in buildings. You know, they were still open, still heating, etc., being used. So, and a lot of our services out there in the city, around highways, etc., were still functioning. Social care still had to happen, and the council still had to give goods and services. So, the actual total impact on emissions not quite as significant as people maybe imagine. But yeah, we do expect the overall trend to continue to go down.
Have you factored into these numbers what any home workers would have been generated?
Yes, that's one of the categories which has been introduced to reporting for the 21-22 year. So the figure is something like 1.3% of our total emissions is coming from home working.
And how do we, obviously, if we continue with a hybrid working policy, how do we then try and improve that number?
So whilst that element is additional, it is offset by reduced employee commuting, which is sort of far more energy intensive than people working at home. But going forward, you know, that is an area where we will have to support staff with advice and guidance about the reference to home energy use, etc., to do something.
Surely that would have been offset with the active travel plans that we have going forward. I don't know if you said anything then. My screen is all quiet at my end.
Yes, yeah.
Probably one thing to say also on the reporting is it's an area that understanding of the reporting is developing all the time. So you have periods where things look like going down. You go, oh, actually, there's now a way to measure this, and then that chunk gets added on. So as you mentioned, homework in, you know, there was always an element of that, but it's only a way of on a proxy to put it into there, and it will be a challenge because obviously we can decide what energy we're purchasing. We can decide, you know, if we want to insulate build. We can't tell people to do that to their own house. It's not in our gift. And so, you know, it's one of those things that we will help and incentivize as much as possible. But then it comes down to this, what's the word you use for offsetting? Fancy long word we used earlier.
Sequestration.
Sequestration is that we've got to accept that we won't be able to offset all ours. So we'll have to do, you know, offset in other ways. But you're right, it's a challenge.
And if I can add also, I mean, it's mentioned at a point in the report, our emissions naturally tend to kind of increase over time because of increased activity. You know, Newport is expanding, and that means expansion of services to cover that, you know, extra population, extra housing developments. You know, we need to plan our waste collection, and that means having more vehicles on the road over time. So there's kind of that natural trend works against us when we're talking about lowering overall emissions. So, you know, it's quite a complex, really, world.
Yes, I completely understand. It's a very, very complex, and it is always going to be moving. What are have you factored into your sort of calculations and your plans the obvious increase in energy which people are going to be experiencing at home, and then their desire to then go, actually, it's not really viable for me to be working from home, having my heating on, my lighting on. I want to go back to the office.
Assumption going forward.
Well, we don't, in terms of our carbon reporting, we don't make assumptions or into the future. We have to wait until the end of the reporting period to see what the impact was. But due to the nature of hybrid working, as far as I understand, there haven't been any decisions made yet to not heat any areas this coming winter. So even if there's a sort of a minimal or a proportion of the staff in those buildings, they're still heated and they're still lit. So actually, you know, the number of people in them won't affect the council's carbon emissions, but obviously it will reduce that home working figure by the end of that year. If we've got evidence that a lot more people have come into our spaces, we can track that through data, then we'll get that benefit from the reduction in home working emissions.
I hear what you're saying, that you don't want to make a guess. However, I fundamentally believe that you will start to, the Newport City Council will start to see people saying, I do not want to be working at home through the winter. I want to be in the office.
I think you're right. I think we're likely to see that increase. But probably it's worth understanding in terms of our overall staff, actually the majority of our staff, well, the majority of staff are teachers, but the majority of our non-teaching staff, you know, things like the highways and other people who work Sylvia are all out and about. The number of office workers per se is only a small percentage. I think more will come back over the winter, but for some there's also, they've seen the financial benefit in not travelling. So obviously fuel costs have gone up considerably post-pandemic. So you know, trying to fill up a car as well, it's a financial decision that will affect. But you know, we probably will see an uplift. Perversely in this, that will reduce the council's contribution to emissions because they'll be coming to a place that's already warmed and heated and not having to heat up their own individual components. Overall, in the scheme of things, I'd say it's likely to be relatively small, but you know, but this is why we're getting this tracker now. It's not perfect, but we're getting this so we can monitor and understand these changes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, of course.
To sound another caution. Very few people in Newport are going to cycle in the hillier areas. We need to be realistic. Going to get around. We have social workers who need to go from A to B to C, who need to use their cars. We have businesses in the city centre rely on the footfall. Another couple of stands we can close down. With cars becoming more environmentally friendly, I hope we don't go down this route of implementing congestion charging, making it so difficult for people to come into the city centre because they will go to Spitty or they'll go to Brown. And actually, it's quite easy to get on the train to Garlic. Ironically, probably easier for some people to get on the train to Garlic. So it's just, you know, economics and the impact on people's lives, welfare, livelihood need to be taken into consideration. And I hope we do take those issues on board.
I think in terms of cars, you know, obviously there's new transport strategies and white cars have become more environmentally sustainable. Not everyone will cycle, it's not suitable for everyone. I think it's recognised in terms of national policy that we need to see a growth in cycling. I'm at Down, for example, you know, I'm at that end of really bad carbon footprint that I have got an electric car, so I can half justify that at the moment. But we do know we need to see for various reasons in terms of people's health, in terms of well-being, in terms of making these feel nicer and all the other benefits. So we need to increase. But yes, cars are always going to be a component of that. I would say that you know, enhanced and improved public transport is an important aspect of that because people feel they've got to rely on public transport, they're more likely to get into it. So you know, it's going to be a whole blend in terms of our fleet usage. I don't think there's particular assumption on any reduction. Like I said, most of our fleet is municipal fleet. Good luck, Sylvia, asking the refuse collectors to try and cycle around and pick up bins. That's not really realistic enough.
Or get them to cycle into work with that as well.
So, you know, we've got to be realistic, and also, as I think mentioned earlier, you know, we've got to grow a city growing 10%. You know, in 10 years from now, we will need more highway vehicles. We can't magic that out, but we've got to make them as environmentally sustainable as possible to reduce that.
And if I come back to that, I mean, from our perspective, in terms of delivering, you know, the actions of the climate change plan, I mean, we have a clear direction of travel in terms of trying to, you know, reduce our emissions and, you know, influence the areas that are under our control. However, there will be other departments of the council that, you know, have different remits, and there's been a huge regeneration push for the city centre, for instance. So obviously, decisions will be taken higher up on, you know, priorities and how to, you know, make everything work as best as possible. So, you know, with a piece in the jigsaw, if you want, but obviously there's ways of influencing that.
Thank you all. Gavin,
Yeah, it was yes, sorry, Jay, it was just something, I'm my sins, I'm on Newport Transport's board. And one of the initiatives that they've started doing, utilising their electric vehicles, is that they pick up the drivers. They do special. I may have misunderstood what they were saying, but I kind of took it as they do special runs to pick up the workforce, so they don't have to use their own vehicles to get to work. I'm just wondering if there's any way that we could tap into that as well, which would then obviously reduce the requirement of anybody that falls within the remit of what the Newport Transport are doing, to get the Newport City staff to their locations of work. I don't know whether it's worth a conversation or if it's something you've already picked up with.
I think certainly mobility of staff and getting them to work is one of the things to consider as part of one of our subgroups. I mean, obviously, actually, the location of the civic centre, is we're right in the city, right next to a train station, not very far from the bus stand. So we certainly need to try and encourage staff to do that, but it's also enhancing the public transport offer as well. But yeah, I think that's something that certainly we can take back and pick up on the relevant subgroup.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, thank you. Before we let you go, I'd like to touch on something I don't think has been touched on this thing yet, is the finances of these operations. Now, in another authority that I'm familiar with, they set up a capital fund, and whatever savings they accrue, they reinvested. So, for instance, if you insulate, relight, reboil a school, for instance, where are the savings?
So it varies across the board. The vast majority of improvements that we've done today have made a saving that have been maintained bottom line. In schools, it's a little bit different. Some of them have all been on interest-free loans, and what's that specific? So
yeah, due to the fact that energy prices have been relatively low, the majority of savings and investments we may go to repay the loan. So the benefits will defer until that loan is repaid. And you get sort of additional benefit over that actually payment have typically stayed with sites where the projects have happened today and been brought back essentially.
I suggest that's something that perhaps could be looked at, because if you manage to achieve savings, if you're not they're essential ambitions. And the other one was, and it might have been something you said, Paul, in the meeting last year, for instance, when the mayor's car gets out, we buy an electric one. Do we look at the whole life of the technology? You know, because in this industry, it's with electric vehicles being very expensive and the old-fashioned ones being quite a lot cheaper. Do we look at the technology and the money behind that?
we do, but it's an even more complex balancing act, because also as a fleet, we are trialing some things and having, because we need to get our understanding of this to the management of the issues that go along. So, for example, you know, the refuse trucks that we early adopted for, understanding how long we need to collect them up at night, whether we can have different hours to make that cheaper at night, what's the likely running costs of things. So you're 100% right. We don't just replace, we don't go on let's buy electric vehicles as a natural sort of that. It's never going to be a perfect timing, but we've been really successful in getting lots of loads of rotating grants to fund the additional costs when they've been replaced, and we know we've got to get to this by 2030. So it's a balancing act of all those considerations, I think.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for your attendance this morning.
Thank you.
Please. To item 6, the annual information risk reports. And would you introduce yourselves, please?
Okay, thank you very much.
Present.
Thank you. So I'm Mark Leather, Digital Services Manager, and part of People Policy and Transformation Service area. Just to mention that fortunately our head of service, Tracy McKim, is on leave today, as is our strategic director, Reece Cornwall, so they both send their apologies. My colleague in my team is Tarek Slawi, who deals with most of the day-to-day work in relation to this area. So we'll be taking you through the report. And obviously, with any questions you have, and as Janice mentioned previously, our cabinet member Dimitri Petruni is also here to comment as appropriate as well.
Thank you. So can I just clarify this report? We're looking backwards, and this is not supplement to the report we received in July. We talked about it.
Yes, this we do two reports within the kind of service in this area. One is the annual digital report. The other one is the annual information risk report. They are complementary, but they are different. So there are some slight overlaps, but essentially they cover different areas. So in 1 to 2, we draw the annual digital report. So this is complementary to that. Neither of the reports are kind of statutory in that sense, so we do them as kind of what we see as being good best practice. The annual information risk report that we'll go through today is actually in its 10th year, so it's quite mature in terms of how long we've been doing it. But we still, value the feedback we have. Obviously, got different members as part of the panel now, and we don't take anything for granted. We're looking for feedback on what we do. So, as the chair mentioned, it is primarily a look back at 21-22 financial year. Does include some updates from this financial year where it's appropriate, so we don't strictly stick to the 21-22 financial year, but we do so as best we can. It makes sense to give updates where they're relevant. So yes, we do this in the spirit of openness and transparency. We welcome the scrutiny and the feedback, and this is an area where we really need it because we need that external kind of view on what we're doing, because we're looking at the data of the organisation, so it's important. So I'll briefly go through the kind of executive summary for if that's okay, and then obviously we'll take any questions. So this is kind of like the highlights, if you like. First thing is probably the slightly bad news is in relation to our public services network clients, which has actually lapsed. Largely due to some sort of scheduling issues, and I'm not going to take any questions in relation to that. The immediate good news is in relation to our processing of card data for credit card payments, etc. So that's PCI compliance. So we're actually compliant for the first time in a number of years. So that's very positive news. Again, in the kind of positive side, we carried out a benchmarking exercise across local authorities in Wales called the Cyber Stock Take. In that, Newport came out pretty well. So 3 scores above the Welsh average, 2 the same, 1 below the Welsh average. So, that kind of benchmarking piece we will do pretty well. Got lots of ongoing activities, of which this is one in terms of the kind of management of our data. We provide an information management services school, so that's been extended to 3 years, so that's a positive step. And on this occasion, we've actually offered it to secondary schools, and we have 3 secondary schools that have taken us up on that offering, so that's good news. One of the things we'll always talk about, and this is part of this process, is communications and awareness raising, because the human is always tends to be the most likely to make a mistake when it comes to data problems. So we continue with our training. We do it via Teams now. We used to do it via face-to-face, but we do it primarily via Teams now. Just to mention in terms of that, because of the challenges around the pandemic and resources, social services training numbers reduced, and they are starting to improve, although we still need to get them back up to the levels they were prior to the pandemic. We do lots of training for schools. We've also trained specifically the track, trace, and protect team. So obviously they're handling some data on behalf of the organisation. So we carry out some specific training there. As you'll recognise, and we've mentioned in the digital report, technology is so important now, and we do rely on it. So business continuity is important. So as part of that, we have been making a strategic move to cloud, and also there is a planned SRS data centre move, which is due to complete by, I think, probably the end of December, which will move a number of pieces of our infrastructure from the Civic Centre to Vantage in Newport, and that will make us more resilient as a result, we expect. Final couple of things just to mention. So members will probably be using it, those that are remotely attending. We migrated to the Microsoft Always On VPN solution, so that's moves away from the previous one. That's again saved us money. In terms of our dealing with information requests, as mentioned in the report, freedom of information, we exceeded the target. We've done, I think, 8 out of the 10 years we've reported on it. Subject access request, which is request for personal data, we missed the target last year, but we are moving in the right direction in relation to that. So that's as much as I was going to kind of share with both here and obviously virtually, and actually happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions?
Yes, good morning, thank you. You mentioned the cyber stock uptake, and rightly said, do really well, but the standout figure there is the training and awareness, and historically we are falling below the Wales average. So I just wondered, what are we doing to address that? And secondly, you mentioned in the report mentions digital champions, which I think is a great thing. So you've got approximately 30 digital champions. Just wonder how, is that just somebody who said they're really good at the computer and have to give other advice, or have they had training, have they done like the Microsoft program or training, or is it just a case of, I like know to do an Excel spreadsheet, let's do it this way? I just want a bit more detail on that, please.
Okay,
thank you.
So in terms of the training and awareness raising, as I mentioned, internally we have done less social services training than we had done previously, and our plans to increase that. So that's one area where we have reduced our training. In terms of the actual, because we've done it via teams now, we've actually managed to do more, get more coverage than we had previously. But yes, that is one of our kind of weaker areas. One of the things we've done, and members will actually be subject to this as well as members of staff, is we've implemented a solution called Meta Compliance. So you probably have seen some little e-learning videos around passwords, which I know a large number of members have done. So that's one of the areas that we are trying to bolster. So we've always done lots of training. Going to do more training to schools. Like I said, we need to increase the amount of social services staff. But the e-learning piece is something we are sort of targeting as a mechanism for reach in all areas. So, for instance, I think the password training, we've got something like 1,400 people that have actually completed that training, which that's been in the space of a couple of months. So coverage and the kind of reach of that is a lot better. But we never take it for granted, because we are the weakest link in relation to. Relation to the digital champions. So essentially, it's kind of a voluntary network. It's for people who have an interest in technology. The idea being is they will have access to things quicker than others. So, for instance, when we're rolling out new solutions, we engage with them. So the Always On VPN solution, which is a remote access solution, so they would have access first. Yeah, kind of regular meetings with them, sort of briefing them on. Interestingly, we've got an interactive screen here, and very shortly we'll be giving digital champions training before others in terms of how to use these screens. So it is a voluntary network. As ever, there's always room for improvement, and we do review kind of membership, but essentially that's what the membership.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to give you an easy time. Yeah, I've got no issue with the report. Just a couple of points, Mark. I noticed the councillor detected data protection section here. I'm just sort of, I mean, I've just got an email now as we are in this meeting about someone claiming a rat infestation in Bellevue Park, and sometimes I supply, images and all that sort of thing. Now, we're okay, aren't we, to sort of forward those to officers who deal with these issues, and in terms of the data sort of protection of the people who send you the. In many cases, they do send information that are quite personal. I have that with people, sort of who have homelessness needs and that sort of thing. Is that right what we're doing, or do we have to seek their prior permission before I send the information to the officers who are dealing with these sort of things?
I think the gist of it is that it's fine, but Eric.
Yeah, I think there's a general understanding that the public, they know that you don't discharge the services yourselves, and that you do need to contact appropriate officers within the council. That said, it wouldn't to give your constituents a brief reminder, I need to pass this on, for example. But I think there's a broad understanding that a certain amount of information will need to be passed on. So I think you're fine.
I think the other thing to add to what Tarek said is there's also a consideration as to what that data is. So if it's graffiti or whatever, then obviously that's a different consideration to if it is personal data about their circumstances or about the circumstances of somebody else. So as Tarek said, consent is always very beneficial, just so there's absolute clarity in terms of, can I just check that you are comfortable with me forward this on to the council on your behalf? I'm assuming that is what you would like, but yes, that is always helpful. And that can be verbal, it doesn't have to be written.
But if you deem it might be quite personal, you should ask for their permission.
I would say so, yes, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, you do it on the, on the basis that what you pass information within the authority is obviously treated confidentially by everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's that inherent expectation that once you've passed it on, that it's treated accordingly by the council. But yes, there's potentially a slightly grey area with you as a council passing that on. So that's why it is better to have consent and full openness in terms of what is going to be useful. But as Tarek said, people pass this to you on the basis that they expect you to pass it on. So.
And the other one the latest sort of issue we've had here with the, I don't know what it was, hacking, cyber attack, I don't know, but I lost my account for 5 days. I finally on Tuesday I managed to get them. I mean, I can understand the need for caution and all that, but we were completely shut out from your account during this period. It's a problem, it's a problem when people rely on email. I mean, I wouldn't deal, you see, through social media or anything like that. Have to be through the council email. So, could we not do something better than what has happened? I mean, I know it coincided with a bank holiday, with the Queen's funeral and all that, but I mean, if it was a school or something like that, that's quite a big issue.
Yeah. So just to give, I can't say too much in the kind of public forum in a sense, but in terms of the scale of what we had was probably pretty minor in the kind of the scheme of things. So it's always a concern and it always has impact. So I have to be clear on that. And in the case of this one, and communications is a big part. We're doing a lessons learned to see, because I think the very first message that came out was probably too strong. Again, when these things happen, people are scrabbling around to find out what the situation is. And obviously a key thing is to communicate to users, but also exactly what that says is important too. So actually the scale of what it was actually a lot less than arguably what it might have appeared. However, once that is the case and there are issues internally with kind of devices, then we've got to be very careful, because essentially one device can potentially cause an issue for multiple devices. So whilst a number of individuals are obviously affected, the safe thing we need to do is to make sure that those devices are secure and there's no potential impact on other devices. So you know, they will have an impact, but I suppose what we're trying to balance is the impact on individuals compared with the potential for a huge impact on the organisation. So it's a difficult balancing act, but we would always err on the side of caution because of the connected nature of devices.
Just to add to that, as part of the investigation, one of the key things is the lessons learned, which we're going through at the moment. So we've had a session with SRS. We planned a session on the Newport side. So we look at everything. Everything's documented. We look back at our actions taken, decisions made, and we essentially review so that should we need to act again, the whole process hopefully it's a lot more seamless. We practice these scenarios as well. We've got a desktop exercise coming up in October. So the more we do, the more we hone our response skills.
But I think fundamentally we will need and always will kind of err on the side of caution in the sense of if there's a risk of a particular device, then we will take that risk out of the way by essentially stopping access to that device. That's unfortunate, and that's obviously what we're trying to avoid. But in those circumstances, that is the better option.
Thank you, Councillor.
No, I mean, I was going to raise 2 points. One was about the social service courses and the lack of attendance. Clearly, that's an area of high risk. So perhaps the recommendation would be to ensure that stronger drive is taken to ensure they do that, because in all these cases in the past where documents have been left and something like that, particularly sensitive information. I mean, I was lucky with my cyber attack being done. I just had to change my password, but I don't know how you got locked out for 5 days.
It was from Thursday to Tuesday.
Yeah,
I mean, I thought, well, on Tuesday, I mean, it was relatively straightforward to reconnect me back, when I came in. I saw the chair actually sorting. They scanned the computer, and I could have done that on Thursday, I felt.
Yeah, like I say, it's difficult to say. We're still investigating what happened and our responses. I know we prioritised staff because, as Mark said, it's a delicate balance between balancing that risk and getting people back working again. So we did draw up a priority list. There's certain requirements of SRS. I think they needed, different people to be on site. Others less effective. They could perhaps just change the password. So all this was being calculated, in the background, to get people back up and running as soon as possible, while still mitigating any potential risk to the network as well.
Again, without going into any details, depending on what people did in the circumstances, then there were different activities that need to be taken for those devices. Again, based on risk and so forth. So it's never quick enough. I appreciate that, but it is that balance of risk.
Thank you. Is everybody else done the questions? Okay, thank you. Could I just touch on one of them, please? Page 102. Freedom of information requests. They've doubled over 10 years. And I think we really need more information, you know, what's been the cost of servicing these requests? And perhaps more importantly, is it something we can overcome by publishing more information to make it unnecessary for people to raise information requests?
In relation to the first question, we could estimate. So within the system we use, we do give a sort of quantitative estimate of how long it's taken to kind of carry out a response. It would be an estimate, if you like. It's not going to be a precise number, but we could certainly look at that in terms of doing some sort of calculation. Obviously, it's the statutory requirement, so in a sense, we don't have any choice about whether we do it or not. In relation to kind of publishing data, that is something we always attempt to do in terms of looking for areas where we can proactively publish rather than having requests. So, for instance, in the council tax area, that's one where we've done things on pupil numbers and various other things. We've got a web page which is newport.gov.uk/transparency, which has a number of data sets on there. So I think the short answer is we try wherever we can to do that. However, because individuals can ask essentially any question about anything, then it is quite difficult to sort of stop those requests, for want of a better description. So we do look for those opportunities, but because people can ask for anything, then that's always been difficult. We do how it leads a freedom of information group internally in the organisation. So we do ask of the people who come to that group, have they got the opportunities for publishing data to reduce it. So I'm not saying that we couldn't, but I think we do try and do that already.
Because there is a clause that you can say it's a disproportionate amount of money to find out this piece of information. And again, you could tell us if that clause has been used.
Yeah, that's something we could report on. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think your other question was the increase in numbers, and I think that can be attributed to just general awareness of the legislation increasing over the years. References to it on the news and in the press.
Again, 20 weeks more or less.
Yeah, it's very well.
Okay, if everybody's content, thank you very much for your attendance this morning.
Thank you. Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
okay, so we're back to the strategic equalities plan. We were asked to consider whether it's a true reflection, whether the annual report highlights the ongoing commitment to equalities, whether the annual report highlights the ongoing commitment to equalities effectively and focuses on the appropriate areas for development, and whether it wishes to provide comments and recommendations. Okay, so item 1. You can
The bold statement is with a word. Well and true reflection.
no, to be realistic.
I think the environment, I found that hard because I could see progress.
Oh, sorry, we're only dealing with this one, this first report. Can we come to a conclusion?
On the third report.
Yeah, on the first report.
We go backwards again now.
I thought we were
Unrealistic.
I thought we reached the summary.
No.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So I think that's okay.
Yeah. So we contend that it reflects the true account of council's progress. Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
Let's just do that. We take on board the comments and the
Yeah.
recommendations and ensure that in future we find out whether they have taken up recommendations.
On Dominic, commitment to equalities effectively. I mean, you know, other than a couple of reservations we had, you know, over statistics, I think that was okay. And the other one that we highlighted there was whether we were getting proper ethnic complexity on the committees. What did we make that?
Do you want me to confirm what I've got, just
Please.
for clarity? So what I've got at the minute committee that I've noted is that Janice and Donald will be providing more information about the fortnightly meetings and whether the recommendations be taken on board there.
Yeah.
I've got your comment, Councillor Rheoli, about it would be helpful for an outline of the topics explored in the SE group to be included as well. We've got the exit survey questions, which will be, I assume, coming from Janice for me to share with the committee, and she welcomes recommendations on those. I've got Councillor Horton's point about expanding the network of councils that we measure against and learn from. With both of them come back with an answer for that. Councillor Bright, I've got your point regarding the data on pages 40 and 42 being the same, well, not being different, but regarding the same information. So hopefully we'll have an answer around that one. And Councillor maybe I've got your point as well about why the sudden jump in female employees from page 40, that they said they would come back with an answer as well. So that's just solely on the strategic quality report. Have I missed anything there really, rather than highlighting the importance of having an update on the recommendations that we make?
That we made.
Yeah, previously made.
Can I just perhaps might be helpful, because when we were talking about previous recommendations, the previous recommendation was about including white people on these boards.
Yeah.
So if you mention that, otherwise, the
Very
previous recommendation, people won't know which recommendation it was.
Absolutely.
Well, I've taken the white word out when I asked for the complexities, but we take your point on board.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying white.
No.
And that's what we were talking about. So
I think the membership of that also should be more transparent, you know,
yes,
because it had raised questions from some people, you know, I think it should be transparent.
And that's for the fortnightly meetings, is it? Or
Yes.
just generally?
well, there's a separate point, wasn't it?
They did say that they were making the fortnightly meetings, didn't they?
Yeah.
They said they're focusing on Ukraine.
Yes, so the focus has shifted to tensions, but I think the point still stands if you wanted an update anyway.
You got the point about the strategic equality group?
Yes, with more information about what topics they explore in the council. I've got that.
I think with respect to the report that they should add
Certainly.
what they've achieved or what they've discussed.
Absolutely, I've got that down for you, Chris, then.
Yeah, she was asked to comment on the specific the 6 specific equality objectives. And she said that it was tied up in the data, but it was very clear that they've been asked to achieve.
So you can recommend, well, ask for clarity on the aims in future.
Yeah.
Well, that noted too. Do you want me to run through what I've got for the climate change report and the annual information risk while I'm going, or do you want to go through each one individually? What's best?
Let's see what we're asked to consider, and then we can have it on. Is the information submitted adequate?
The climate change report. Yeah.
Yes.
Pretty happy with the climate change. Well, it's an introductory report, so it's
Yeah, the information, was it sufficient?
I think that's a difficult question to answer because it was fine from a scrutiny point of view. It did lack detail, it did lack timetables, it did lack financial information. But I don't think we necessarily need to say it's sufficient because some of the information, doesn't.
Well, that's a perfectly acceptable answer that, additional information was required, but unfortunately, we don't know what information they hold.
And it's early days of the report, so it would be unfair to ask them to submit additional information if they're still working away from the report. But I don't think necessarily need to say that the information was.
Okay, the second point then, is an annual report sufficient, or do we want more regular updates? They did say that they were putting up a lot of information to the council, but not necessarily specific to the committee.
But it does go through other channels, doesn't it?
I believe it would go to performance. I believe it would go to the place committee, which wanted to deal.
So it goes through other scrutiny, it goes through the cabinet. Perhaps we could, in 6 months' time, just get a brief one-page executive summary to see how the progress is going. We're noting, but if there are big issues, then we can come towards us rather than having it back in 6 months as a suggestion. Just to say we're on track, so to speak.
So really are to the conduits and the outcomes of those conduits.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Just
Then you comments about that.
Absolutely.
Comments and recommendations.
So I've made, I've noted obviously the updated 6 months recommendation there. I've got the information about charges for yourself, Councillor Wharton, that they said they would provide a total separately, so I'll chase them for that. And more suggestions Chair about how we look at savings and the redistribution. Most of the comments I've got that generally the committee are quite happy with the report. Obviously, like you said, Councillor, it's early days. They're just starting out the reporting cycle, so hopefully there'll be more information to come, but happy to add anything I've missed.
Yep.
Content?
Okay. Content. And then item 6, then the annual information reports. Rheoli. We only ask to provide comments.
I've got, if it helps, the comments from yourself, Councillor Evans, about them having a stronger drive to ensure social services training is completed. And your comment, Chair, about the disproportionate cost clause, which could be included in the report for more information.
Yeah. Okay, content, because the other thing that we talked about at length was this breakdown of service last week, wasn't it? So I think that's just, well, it's transitory, and I don't think we can make any recommendations. So over to you.
Over to me. There's not much really new in terms of actions. Obviously, we had the actions from the previous meeting, which would be the 29th of July, I believe. Both are completed. Comments and recommendations sent to officers, and we had that survey summary circulated to you in August. So both actions were completed there. And then we move on to the draft work programme for June to May 22-23. Obviously, it would be a little bit pointless to look at today's meeting and previous meetings as this been done now. But going forward, I'm committee happy with what we've got going forward. What I would add there's been a slight change to the work programme. Now I'm looking at it. That has happened literally today. The Scrutiny annual report isn't coming to committee next week, so that'll be a 2-item agenda, not a 3. In the October meeting, the corporate annual report and the corporate annual wellbeing reports have been combined, so they're only one report. So again, that would be a 2-item agenda, and the rest of the year is a stands. So happy to take any comments you've got on the way that it's today.
Can I make one general comment? In the past, it's always helpful to try and get the draft minutes within a week of the
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we've got what we've done.
Really.
I already mentioned prior about concerns about having 3 meetings for this committee during when other scrutiny committees are meeting, 7 workload. Can I just clarify, looking at this here, we've got the corporate plan draft themes.
Yeah.
And then the following one, corporate annual report.
Yeah, so
what's the?
So next week, the corporate plan and draft themes is a new corporate plan draft themes for the next 5 years. The corporate plan annual report is the annual report for 21-22. It's an annual report of what the corporate plan is now because at the previous financial year, whereas the draft themes are not the draft 3 themes for the next 5, if that makes sense.
No, I'm so sorry.
So they're not totally separate, but they're 2 separate reports. One is laying the plans for the next 5 years, and one is the annual report for the previous year.
There's it back to the forward-looking plans and the past.
Which is the one we should have had for the meeting, which was cancelled.
Corporate plan draft themes. That's why it's been put into the 30th. Initially, it wasn't supposed to be there, but just obviously with the passing of the Queen, we had to postpone that one.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
And rather than adding another meeting, as I knew the committee weren't particularly happy about it, I thought it was probably a better idea to add it to what we already had.
But the problem with that is it won't be a big report because this is covering up all of the work of the council for the next 5 years. All I have now.
From what I've seen of the report and what I have seen in the committee do it previously, it wasn't a really huge report because it's just the draft themes at the minute, is my understanding. Obviously, that agenda is going to be published today anyway, so when I circulate the agenda today.
Will that be the same agenda we've already had?
A different agenda because it's a different
Well,
lineup.
this is the problem I've got because I've read that report.
Yeah, it'll be the same report, exactly the same.
So
It's just on a different. Well, it'll have
The page numbers will change.
the page
Oh,
numbers
no,
will
the
change.
page numbers, that's fine. If it was going to be a separate report, I'd be going, no.
I promise.
Thank you.
Promise.
But of course, changing the page numbers does make it much more awkward if you read
Yeah.
them.
And on the page numbers, you'll notice when we go through the meetings, if you're looking at online, it doesn't.
Yeah,
go
it's not always
to the
consistent.
page
Is it?
numbers. You've got to.
It will be the same report. It will have all the same information in it. The only difference agenda, different agenda for a different day, the different items.
Yeah, no, I fully appreciate it, but I'm still trying to get my head around. We're going through we're considering the corporate plan at our next meeting.
Yeah,
On
and then
next Friday, and then we've got the annual report following meeting. I can't understand why they can't be combined.
No, they really are two very separate things, you know.
No, they're not the same. Corporate plan going forward, so they're not. We've never had to. We're creating additional work for ourselves.
But you would hope that the forward corporate plan is totally different from the past corporate. Well, you know, you'd hope that they were different hopes, different aspirations.
But it would only be different on the basis that you've had an election and you've got a new corporate plan. So this one will be different, but it shouldn't be in 4 years' time, looking back at the corporate plan going forward. So going forward, the annual plan should be one.
Yeah, in years 2, 3, 4,
Yeah.
we're only looking at one plan. There won't be a corporate objectives, or there'll be a look back at last year.
yes, it'll be a look back at last year.
Next year there shouldn't be one. And
I take your point, Councillor, about how it would have been convenient for it all to come in one meeting. But it just wasn't possible with timelines and.
But it's largely, in some ways, it's almost largely irrelevant because you've got a new corporate plan. So what wasn't achieved, it's pretty much, it's not such a whole meeting because you've got a new corporate plan, new themes for a new 5-year term.
you know, I've known you two guys have expertise on this. You've been doing it for many years, but the stuff we're going to report on for last year, be auditable. And at some point it will go as part of the audit process.
Have the number of meetings increases here for this scrutiny committee relative to last year?
Couldn't tell you off the
They
top of my
seem to
head.
be more frequent.
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. It's certainly something I can provide separately. But I wouldn't have said that they've increased. It was only the additional meeting that was put in this month that, well, one was cancelled anyway to balance out. When we create work programmes, we base it off of one meeting every 6 weeks, which doesn't always work. I appreciate that. It doesn't always work out like that. But I think with circumstances being what they are and timing being what it is, we've just seen a lot of work all at once. And I appreciate it. It is a lot all at once. And it's not how it's been historically. Going forward, I can't imagine that it's going to be like this. If you look at the rest of the programme, just for this year, it does. Calm down is not really the right term, I suppose, but it does even out. It's just circumstance, and it's not much we can do about it, unfortunately.
And what the Welsh language report was in addition, wasn't it?
No, it was the.
No, till last year. We didn't. We've only put this in this year.
Yes, the Welsh language is a new report. In terms of additional meetings, today's meeting was technically the additional meeting we agreed to. But opposed to that, there are no additional meetings that have been put in or agreed with by chair. The rest are standard what we would do for a year.
Okay, so we'll meet again next week.
So are we going to have the draft minutes this time?
So from today for next week, do you mean?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's not possible. With a day or less than a day's turnaround for minutes, it's impossible. What I've spoken to the head of law of regulation, his advice was that we do 2 sets of minutes at the next committee meeting. So that'll be October's committee meeting.
So when you say it's not possible, reason being?
Time. It's frankly, if you think we've had a 2-hour meeting now, the minutes will be typed up in a rough draft. They'll have to be refined. I'll have to check them. They'll have to be redrafted. It is a long process, which is why we have a week for it usually. It's just circumstance that we've got 2 meetings in the space of 2 weeks. It's not possible.
Yeah, so maybe that's, we'll be having more meetings to see than previously. Because we were able to see the draft minutes.
And I suppose the point about best practice is, should I really be approving draft minutes at the end of October for a meeting I'm having today? That'd be, sorry, it's too long a gap. It's not healthy to try.
But we've asked for the minutes within a week.
Well, explain, we're only going to get before next meeting.
But it just wouldn't logistically be possible to do a same day turnaround for minutes if an agenda needs to be done today. Alternatively, the other advice was given is I can publish an agenda and the minutes could follow, and you'd have those before next meeting, but it certainly wouldn't be today. It wouldn't be a full week.
It just helped,
No,
draw attention to maybe just an emphasis, but they're not going to be big changes.
No, definitely
not
not.
going to do that.
No, definitely not. And I appreciate Councillor Evans' comments about it is a significant gap between meetings, and you all have busy schedules and you do so much that it can be a little, you can forget what happens in between and you could lose sight of specifics, but it's just circumstance. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do a turnaround in less than a day. It would have to either be minutes to follow. I could get you those by probably next Wednesday, as an addition to the agenda, which comes out today, or you could do 2 sets of minutes at the start of the next meeting.
If the minutes can come by next Wednesday, I think that would be a very well,
Yeah,
more than reasonable compromise. We've got the minutes 2 days to have a look at them before the meeting. Yeah. Okay. Right,
If you're happy with that, Chair.
are we concluded now?
Yeah, if you're happy.
Thank you. Thank you all. It's quite a long meeting.